Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Substack Live. I'm Stephen Rosenbaum, the Executive Director of Sustainable Media Center, and I am honored to be joined by this great intergenerational group, Yael, Maya, and Imre. And while Emma tends to introduce people, I do things a little differently. And so I thought what we would do is just begin by asking each of you to give us, and it started because Yael, I tried to write an intro for you, and you've been so many places and done so many interesting things that it was going to be huge. And so we'll let each person introduce themselves and then we'll go into the conversation. And I'll go first.
So does that mean I need to not make it huge? I know it's a complicated
It's
introduction.
a, it's a, look, it's been a journey. And we've known each other a long time.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Yael Eisenstadt. I am currently the policy director at an org called Cybersecurity for Democracy, although we will be rebranding very soon. So you'll hear a different name in about 10 days from now, based out of New York University. I have spent about 25 years combating extremism, anti-democratic behavior, one could say. First half of my career mostly overseas, as a diplomat, as a national security advisor at the White House, and then ever since 2013, more in the private sector and NGO world. So the shortest version to where we are now is in 2018, I went over to Facebook to head their elections integrity work, right after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and left 6 months later, made it very clear that they weren't empowering me to do what they hired me to do. Started speaking publicly about how I thought the company was failing the public and all of us, and have worked to really try to figure out what accountability for this industry looks like ever since. And I'm sure we'll dig into all those things. So that was still long, but I try to condense it as much as I could.
Thank you. Maya, go next.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Maya Engelhorn. I am with Wired Human, and I am with leading the Youth Coalition. And so we have a team of high school and college students from around the country that want to kind of reclaim their autonomy in the digital age. And so we focus on different digital literacy initiatives, and we also are really just big on bringing young people into spaces where decisions are being made about tech. And so we'll host kids online safety roundtables in DC, and we'll bring together lawmakers and tech executives and young people to testify about what it's actually like to grow up online. And so, yeah, we do kind of a number of different educational and kind of advocacy initiatives. But yeah, our work yeah, focuses on just online safety and bringing attention to those needs. So happy to be
Okay,
here. Thanks for having me.
excellent. Imre.
Yeah, I'm Imre. I'm an incoming Jefferson Scholar at the University of Virginia. So I think my entire life has been shorter than Yale's career in this space. So I'm just so honored to be able to be in this conversation today. Um, I've done work in the civic technology space around building platforms that create healthier civic information ecosystems, especially for local government and local elections. And then I'm currently a democracy architect at Civics Unplugged and Bridge Alliance, where I'm working around these issues of what a healthy democracy looks like with a very different media and social media space than we've, had for the vast majority of American history. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be here and be here with such incredible people to have this discussion.
So part of what Sustainable Media Center does that I think is important and different is, you have two young people on this Zoom who are who understand personally what it's like to live in a world that is manufactured around social media. And then you've got an advocate who's basically spent her career fighting that battle. And my hope is that in putting these groups together, we learn things that are unique and not and so let me start with an unusual question. Um, Depending on the lens I wake up looking through, I could either argue that we are at a moment where real change is about to happen and is happening, or that things are getting worse, not better. Anyone want to take either side of that argument?
I want to let one of them go first. I have so many thoughts, but I'd love to hear one of you first.
Right, I feel like you have a lot of like background. I would just be curious to hear your democracy perspective, but I
Yeah.
think that I'll just speak to in just the oversaturation of content that my generation has experienced. I think we've really recognized um just like the really like vocal and manipulative agendas on kind of all sides. And I think in the midst of all of that, I think a lot of my peers are really waking up to the reality that they need to have, um, their ability to think critically, especially in the age of AI, and to kind of question some of the narratives or some of the um, just like kind of like language or like things that are shared like online and then just in media as a whole. Um, and so I think with that comes this recognition that yeah, we need to yeah, just question everything and that the things that we are told aren't always what they appear to be. So yeah, those are some of my just like initial thoughts, and what kind of gives me hope is that in the midst of um, so much information that I think we are able to kind of start seeking out like content of value and that people have more of a desire for truth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of agree with Maya in the sense that uh, our media landscape right now is very oversaturated, and a lot of that content is of very low quality and really not additive to the information diets of Americans, right, in a positive manner. Um, I think we're seeing the barrier to entry for media generally, being significantly lowered. And I think that can be positive in certain ways, right? There's more diverse media. There are more people working in the media space, like more independent journalists, right? But we're also seeing, especially through social media, the empowerment of misinformation at a very large scale. I think we're kind of starting to face some of the most direct and toughest challenges of this new kind of media landscape, especially with artificial intelligence. Again, whatever bar we had previously, lowering that again for content, right? Whether in print, whether in video form. And so I think that's deeply scary in a sense. Like I think we look at elections, we look at just our general culture and civic life in our country has been incredibly impacted by that. But I also do think that there are some areas where I see positive change. I think generally, and I see this in young people, we're cognizant of the fact that social media use is not necessarily right a positive thing. And I think there's always been that movement. And I think, many of our fellow advisors at the Sustainable Media Center, especially, and people have been leading these initiatives. But I think we're seeing a broader realization. We're seeing more deliberate decisions to reduce social media usage to try to increase reliability in our media diets. And we're also seeing organizations that are looking to develop new social media platforms that are looking to develop tools, right, that can make that use a little bit healthier, or that can allow for people to engage with media that is more curated in the positive sense, right, where there's more of a filter, there is a bar to content. And so I think, that's kind of the flip side with AI. It's also easier to develop alternatives to social media platforms because the development process becomes less costly and more efficient. And so I think there are kind of two positive aspects here. I think we are also dealing with a very dangerous situation. And so I am optimistic in the sense that I think those movements can go in a positive direction and help counteract those, but it's scary to me.
All right. This is so interesting. I love this. This feeds my answer. So, are we better or worse off? Yes, and what's so interesting is in order for change to truly happen, one of the big elements, as you know very well, Steve, is that you also have to first convince the public that there's a problem, And then the storytelling and the narrative about why that problem occurred, what that problem is, has to really take hold before you can then truly say, okay, and now we need to fix this. And I bring this up because years ago, it was a very lonely place to be talking about some of the real ways that mostly social media, but that social media and other issues online and in our media ecosystem, some of the real problems they were causing, it was a bit of a lonely place to early on to be one of the people speaking out about that. And for years, one of my goals has been to try to shift the narrative to not just be about terrible things are happening online, how can we take better control of it, or you're falling for mis and disinformation, what can we do about that? And really help people understand, no, you're actually being manipulated. It's not just that there's bad information out there and these neutral pipes are feeding it to you, and it's kind of your fault for falling for it. And once people understood more and more about how the business incentives of these companies was contributing to an environment that was both manipulating us all and causing real harm. And I feel like we're at the point in this conversation, we don't have to go through every detail of what those harms are. I'm hoping we're starting at a place where we're now talking about what's next. It is so exciting for me to hear people like you guys already at the point of knowing that. And now, how can we control what's next? So I would say we're both in a better and a worse place. One quick example, these court cases in Los Angeles and New Mexico. It was not a given that we would ever get here. I mean, there's so much over so many years that went into fighting to even be heard in court. And I won't get into the whole Section 230 speech here, but there was so much about how to get to the point where the public could actually hear and see evidence and evaluate based on actual evidence whether or not these companies bore any responsibility. And it was such a pivotal moment that frankly, I didn't know would ever come. That's what I've been working on for years. And I think Steve knows, like, our center was so involved in some of the research and the witnesses and all of the things with one of these cases, like intimately involved, that it is a huge moment. It's not a huge moment because financially it's going to change the companies. It's a huge moment because when the public had all of the information in front of them in a court, including like discovery, internal documents from these companies, their internal research. They couldn't unsee what they saw. They knew there was a problem here. So that is a huge turning point. That said, on the downside, we do still have a very small group of very rich and powerful, mostly men, controlling all of these companies and not being truly held accountable for any of their own decisions and designs that are harming people. So I am so excited that I keep meeting students who like, this is their field of study. That's amazing. This was not a field of study a number of years ago. I do think we're on a perhaps brighter path when more people like you are saying, okay, we accept that this is a problem, and now what can we do about it? And there's still a long road ahead. So I would say the excitement about being able to collaborate with the folks who have been fighting the legal, business, incentives, privacy side of it, and the younger people who want a different life, who want a different online experience, who want a different way of conversing, just being able to collaborate across that makes me hopeful.
I'm delighted that you put those pieces together because for me, the product liability wins in New Mexico and Los Angeles. Like literally, I just remember first New Mexico, and then I was like, please God, let the next domino fall. Now, just to be clear, so that we don't overpromise and then underdeliver, if you look back to cigarettes as an example, from the moment things started to change, it was a 7-year journey.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I say to everyone involved in this organization is you need to have the patience and the fortitude to be ready to fight a 7-year battle. And we're going to lose some cases. We're going to have some setbacks. And one of the things that these companies count on is us getting tired. And Emma and I did a podcast the other day with an amazing father who lost his daughter to social media. And we asked the question somewhat timidly, is there ever a point at which you and your wife get tired and say, we're going to hand the, and he said, I'm in this for the rest of my life, which was like, okay. Um, Having said that, I want to open up this next line of questioning to the three of you, which is, you know, are there examples either of products or individuals that are beginning to put out into the market safer, more trustworthy social media, either platforms or solutions? Um, are there things that our listeners, our viewers should tune to in terms of supporting?
I'm still going to tend towards letting the two of you go first because you're probably experimenting with more of the newer things out there than I am, but I have lots of thoughts as well I can offer afterwards.
I mean, I think I have two that come to mind, and I don't know if they're necessarily at the scale, Stephen, that you mentioned of replacing social media platforms entirely. But I think actually maybe three. On the more like social media-esque side, there's this platform, Newsreel, which I've started using myself, and so it kind of takes the social media feed style of information, so kind of a scrolling based platform. But the content on it is entirely posted by independent journalists. You can take their own articles that they've written. I think there's a tool where they can convert that into like a newsreel, right? Where somebody can scroll through, get critical information, but it's all verified. You have to be accepted onto the platform, and that content is then very easily accessible. And I think they even have some work that is now partnering with libraries to expose children to this and increase their reach. I do think that that is promising, but it also, I'm optimistic, but it also will cater more to an audience that's already trying to be informed through social media, which is a limited audience, right? And so there's also one, I think it's called Politique. I haven't seen much about it, but it's a similar idea in the sense that it takes a social media interface, but that's more for like political information at a national level, and it uses artificial intelligence, I believe, to summarize bills and to integrate information about what's kind of going on in Congress in one social media-esque platform again. And so I think those are both platforms that I see some promise in. But I don't think that they are like blanket solutions, right? I think that they can address parts of this landscape. But I'd be curious to hear, maybe, I'll write down any of their recommendations and try them out from Yael or Anya.
Can I react to something that Imre said?
Yeah, of
That was
course.
so interesting. It was a really important point. So sure, there are going to be more and more platforms and other opportunities popping up, which is great. Because frankly, I think the age of one social media platform needs to dominate the entire world's way of communicating. I will not be sad to see that model end. And maybe people do want to go more towards, I don't love the idea of people only going to platforms that already reinforce their beliefs. But you made a really interesting point, Imre. You said, I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm capturing your thoughts incorrectly, but it is wonderful that there are going to be other platforms that people can join that really serve their interests. I, though, continue to be focused on the communities that are still most susceptible or vulnerable or being exploited or engaging in dangerous behavior on these other platforms. And here's what I mean by that. Whenever we do put out research, or even when I work there and would talk about these things, of whether it's how many young women are seeing problematic eating disorder content, or whether it's somebody who got radicalized online, not because they were seeking the information, but because the algorithm kept feeding them this content, pushing them into groups, all the things we already know at this point. And then the companies, whether it's Meta or someone else, will come back and say, oh, but that's such a small percentage of our platform. We do more good than harm. My answer is Yeah, I'm glad about the good. I'm here to protect against the harm. And whether it is 1%, which by the way is still millions of people, whether it is 20%, whether it is 80%, every single one of us goes to school with somebody who was radicalized online, or every single one of us is affected by political violence that happened to occur because somebody was radicalized online. So I'm so happy that more and more platforms are going to pop up. And in no way does that change the fact that we have to continue to push for actual accountability in how this business model and design features of many companies are affecting us all. And to your point, Stephen, my gosh, I've been giving the same speech for years and years and years. And I'm not going to stop giving that same speech because, to your point, this is a long battle. Something this monumental, powerful, and rich does not change overnight. So, yes to more platforms, yes to seeking out new tools, and we need to still fix it for the people who aren't like us and are seeking out newer, different niche platforms.
Maya, anything you're seeing out there in terms of a platform we should be aware of?
Yeah, really wise inputs. I have definitely come across like a handful of different platforms um as y'all have kind of mentioned, like there is this growing recognition that the current like popular media platforms aren't really designed with our best interests in mind. And I don't really have any that I have enough experience using that I would specifically recommend. But I do think it really highlights just the growing need because everyone I talk to is complaining about their overusage or struggling to um, like you have these platforms at all, and so kind of resort to deleting it altogether, or they seek out other apps or platforms like that would block these apps or help with time limits, with which also isn't really like a um like root deep solution. But I've seen like Brick and Opal and a lot of these other kind of um, concepts that people will do to, be able to use these platforms in a way that is more mindful. But yeah, I'm definitely inspired to now explore some of these other options.
All right, last question because we'll run out of time. But I'd be remiss if I didn't put it out there with three smart people to talk to. Um, I'm deeply conflicted when I talk about AI. Um, Apple had this big announcement this week, and my Apple user self was like, "That's really cool and interesting." And then I know, our partners at the Heat Initiative have very strong feelings about what Apple isn't doing in terms of protecting young people. Um, when people kind of say to the audience, "Well, if you don't want to use AI, you should opt out of it." I don't know what your experience is, but I find it harder and harder to use anything in which it isn't hardwired into all of my experiences. How concerned are we collectively with AI, and what should we be doing?
In 3 minutes, we have to answer that whole question.
We could go a minute over.
Okay, I'll go first this time because why
That's
not?
where you are.
Um, So yes, I agree. Listen, I use a lot of these products. I would be lying if I said I didn't. I also think, again, it is not completely fair to put it on individuals when the market is absolutely saturating every single aspect of our lives, and this is becoming ubiquitous. So as long as, it's interesting. I'm not for regulating everything, but even the most basic guardrails, it is government's job. That is the job of government to protect its citizens from whether it's corrupt practices, harmful practices, business malfeasance, whatever it is, that is government's job. And so I only say that because, listen, I'm taking a trip soon. I fully admit I used AI to synthesize all the reviews of the like 10 different hotels I'm looking at, and it saved me so much time. There's no question. I also am one of those people who has done enough research to really try to understand how to use these products in a responsible way. And even I know I'm not. We are putting an unbelievable amount of responsibility on the shoulders of individuals to figure out how to navigate systems that are so much more powerful than us and that have infiltrated every single aspect of our lives. So, yeah, I am not anti-AI, but I am anti this narrative that as long as it's going to do this great stuff, future promise that we haven't even really understood what that is yet, who cares about all the harm that happens along the way? It is the only industry that has been, well, maybe not the only, but right now that is able to just release products nonstop with no safety testing, with no assurances that they've at least done all the internal work that they need to do to make sure their products are safe. And at the very least, we need to figure that out so that we can continue to use these products, but not be the ones who bear all the responsibility for figuring it out on our own. How a hugely rich company and powerful company, whether or not they're hurting me. Like that's something that the individual should not have to figure out on their own.
Yeah,
Maya, Imre, yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
I think there is this sense in which, there are many like, yeah, I'll describe these big positive kind of futures that can happen with AI, right? I think there and all of us, I think to some extent will wind up using AI, especially with the current infusion that we're seeing across every platform. But I think to me that there are two like main aspects of this, especially like chatbot infiltration of society that are fairly concerning to me. I think one of them is the use of especially like LLM chatbots in young children. I think I heard a very good analysis of this on the Ezra Klein show. I think it was Yuval Noah Harari was talking about this. As adults, as people are older, right, they have more experience with the world. They have exposure to more of a toolkit to understand what is true, what is false, to make decisions about what they're seeing, and that does not exist to the same extent the younger and younger you get. And I also think there's this danger. We've seen, I think, a lot of what we've been talking about has been about exposure, right? About engagement, right? We have social media platforms that hook us in that are designed very explicitly to do so, but it's mostly this type of manipulation that's occurring. Like yeah, I mentioned, it's occurring through exposure to content, right? And maybe that content is very manipulative, but we still have a certain aspect of agency when we interact with that. And what's scary to me is the idea that these chatbots are getting much better at developing relationships with their users. And when you move past that type of surface level engagement, and it's a very strong surface level engagement, but it is something, it's one of the many, many things that we interact with, right? When we move past that, and instead of getting right, uh, just use as an example, a bunch of advertisements of some sort, whether implicit or explicit, for restaurants on our, on our Instagram feed. If we have a chatbot that we talk to, especially for young children, talk to every day, right? That's recommending that to us. We have a relationship with it, and that means so much more. And then you take that, restaurant recommendation, hotel recommendation, and you turn that into information about the world, right? Into the dangers that we're seeing with causing self-harm in children, right? I think that's really, really scary. And then also, I think uh, the quality of media is really going down, and I think the value of words almost, right? Like they start to mean nothing because they're used and overused and used incorrectly because that's the slop that's often fed into these LLMs that they're trained on. And I just have this profound feeling that I've seen, especially in the past 2 years, 3 years, where I read things and they just mean a lot less. I hear things and they mean a lot less. I think we don't understand what we're saying anymore, and we don't understand what content we're engaging with because it's becoming meaningless, right? There's so much fluff, there's so much kind of language that is without purpose, and so I think that's also deeply concerning to me.
Maya,
Sorry if
you
I
get
went
the
over a
last
little bit
word.
there.
No, not a bit, not a bit. Maya, you get the last word.
I love what y'all shared. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a number of things that concern me. I think, Emma, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of minors using chatbots and having that be some of their first like formative like relationships and going to these chatbots for personal advice. And again, kind of just like over relying on something that is not human and missing an opportunity to have real in-person mentorship and conversations with trusted adults. And so, yeah, that is definitely what concerns me the most in the work that I do with young people. And then just I would say like overarchingly, I would love to see more just AI transparency when it is being used and when it is kind of like working behind the scenes to make decisions. I live in Nashville, and so that has really played out here in the sense that a lot of my friends who are musicians now are competing against AI artists that aren't disclosed as being AI. And so that is just one example of how technology and AI is being set up to kind of degrade the value of content and the quality of art. And it's kind of infiltrating us from every side. And then like Emery was saying, we're losing the value of the human experience and creation and the beauty of what can only really be created and thought up by a real life human. And so I think that's another like fascinating thing that I've seen. And so while education is really important in terms of like responsible usage, I think advocating that there be more transparency and like ethics that are a part of those like innovations is priority for me.
What a fabulous conversation. You guys made my day. Thank you very much. We will be back again next week with another Substack Live. Until then, thanks guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.